Hi, welcome to Magic Lab Academy. My name is Chimeze Nwabo, a 3D animator at Magic Carpet Studios, and in this lecture, I'll be taking you through the modeling fundamentals. Today, we're going to be learning the building blocks, the foundational principles that it takes to create complex models. So whatever it is you want to create, you have in mind to create, if you don't understand these principles, you're going to struggle. So that's what we're going to look at today. Join me. First thing to be familiar with once you start modeling is the create menu. We looked at the file and the edit menu in the previous class. So we're going to go into the create menu more in depth. So this is where you have, all the things you want to create in Maya. You have your knobs primitive. This is a bit deprecated now. We rarely see people using the knobs primitives, but initially that was how people used to, create models in Maya. But nowadays, for the most part, you're going to be focusing on the polygon primitive. So if you look at the polygon primitives menu, you have your sphere, you have your cube, you have your cylinder, you have your cone, you have your torus. So let me show an example. So if I click, if you want to create, what you have to do is you click on it and it comes out. So let's move that out to the up of the way. You remember how to move. Just hit the W key. If I create another one, say, let me create a cone, and you have a cone, let me move that out of the way as well. If I now create a cylinder, so that is how you create your items. Now these are called, let me create a sphere finally. So these are called primitives because they are the building blocks of modeling in Maya. So whatever it is you want to create, any shape you can think of, anything you see with your eyes, no matter how complex it looks, if you examine it closely, you will see that at the end of the day, they are all in one way or another a combination of these primitive shapes that we have here. So you can just take a look around your house. You can look at, let's say, your dining table. You can see that it's either, depending on the way it was made, you can see that the base is some form of a rectangle, right? The legs, some form of a cylinder, right? So one of the things you need to learn as a modeler is learning to see those shapes, learning to be able to break down, whatever you want to work on, into those simple shapes. So I have some examples here. You can look at this furniture set now. You can see, at first glance, like, oh my god, this is so beautiful. But once you start looking at it critically, you can start seeing, okay, this is a rectangle, right? This is also a rectangle. Of course, scale to different proportions, right? But basic shapes. You can look at this vase and it's so fine, it has curves and everything, but you can start looking at it, you can start seeing some form of a sphere, right? And some form of a cylinder, right? So this is a good exercise to do as well when you're trying to, when you're still trying to learn how to model. So this is another example. This is a cup. You can see how this is, a cylinder, right? You can see how this is a laptop. You can see how this is a rectangle. So I'm showing you this for you to understand that what you're doing when you're modeling is basically manipulating primitive shapes to create what you want, right? That is all you're going to be. That's why we're starting with primitive shapes, because everything you're going to be doing in the name of modeling or creating, a prop, you're basically learning how to manipulate shapes. I'm going to be showing you the tools that you can use to manipulate shapes. Once you understand that you're manipulating shapes, and once you understand that you're just using tools to manipulate shapes, you are well on your way to mastering how to model in Maya. All right, but before that, some other concepts we need to look at. I showed us how to move items in Maya. So your move tool, you can move them around, right? In Maya, we deal with objects, right? We learned that in the last class, but objects can also be broken down into components. I will explain that in a bit. So we have we're using our sphere for this example. We have our sphere. Our sphere is made up of, it's just a sphere, right? But if you look just by looking at this the selection lines, you can also see, you can already see that there are some, squares, or some, it's made up of tiny spheres. Now, for you to be able to manipulate this, you need to have access into these components. So Maya has what it calls the component mode. Now, to access the component mode, you need to right click and hold. When I right click and hold, a menu pops up. Now, there's a lot of things happening on this menu, but I want you to just look at the top. You see edge. To the right of the edge menu, you see object mode. You see your vertex mode. You see your vertex face. You see your face mode, multi UV. Now, we are in object mode, but I also want you to pay attention of your edge mode, your vertex mode, and your face mode. So we are currently in object mode. So object mode means that I can select the whole object. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm selecting the whole, or that's what allows me to be able to click and select the whole object. But if I right click and select, let's start with vertex mode, for instance, something happens. So that the color changes, and we can now see some dots, some purple dots on the items. Now, these are called vertices, right? Now, notice that when I click on the sphere, I can't select the whole sphere anymore. But however, I'm able to select dots on that sphere. So I'm selecting the vertices, right? Now, I still have my gimbal, my move gimbal. If I press E, I have my rotate gimbal and I have my scale gimbal. However, if let's say I click on move and I try to move, notice, see what's happening. This can be scary if you're seeing it for the first time. But I can't select, and obviously I can't move the whole object again. So this is called the component mode in Maya. It allows you to get into an object and access, the internal components, basically. So we are in vertex mode currently. So vertex mode allows me to select the vertices of that object. I can drag and select. I can move it around, right? I can select it. And as I move that around, you can notice that I'm basically deforming the sphere. This does not qualify as a sphere anymore just by looking at it, right? So this is what I couldn't do this when I was in object mode, right? I'm going to quickly undo that now, right? So every object in Maya, you can access the component mode. So I'm on the sphere now. I'm on the cube now. If I click on it, this might be much better to visualize. So we can see that these cubes, we have the vertex of the cube, right? Now we also have what we call edge mode. This allows me to select the edges, right? This allows me to select the edges of the cube, right? So once I select the edges, I can move the edges. Now this has gone from a cube to sort of a trapezoid, right? Right now this looks more like a pyramid just by moving the edges around. So you begin to see how through manipulating the components, I can change the shape, right? I can change the shape to something different, right? Now there's another one. The last component I want you to be mindful of is called the face. So you have the face mode. You can move this around. You can move this. I can decide to scale this face. See what's happening. I'm basically changing my shape. If I told you that this was a cube before, because if you didn't see it, you probably wouldn't believe that this was a cube, right? But it's totally different now, just by moving the components. So that is what the component mode allows you to do. It's very important. So every object is made up of a vertex. So the vertex is like the building block, right? Like the atom of your Maya meshes, basically. Every mesh is made up primarily of vertices, right? Two vertices combined together form an edge, right? And then four vertices combined together form a face, right? So that is very important to note. So that's how you create primitives. Primitives are made up of components. You have your vertices, you have your edges, and you have your faces. Manipulating these components is what allows you to create shapes. All right.
Hi guys, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more of this.
Let's talk about how to add divisions to your objects. So I'm going to create, let me delete this and delete this sphere. I'm going to create a cube, for instance. So when I create a cube, I go to the channel box editor and you look at the inputs here. You can see that you have some information about the cube. You have your subdivisions, width, subdivisions, height, subdivisions, depth. So increasing this, I am middle mouse clicking to add some depth, some height, and some width to the cube. So you notice that with this, let me create another cube as well. Scale it as well. So notice shaded so that you can see the wireframe. You can notice that these are two cubes, right? We find out that one has more subdivision than the other. Now, when I remove the wireframe, you find out that they look the same. They basically look alike, and if you can move them around and all, so they look like the same cube. But when I add the wireframe, find out that this one has more subdivisions than the other one. Now, why is this important? It's important because more subdivisions on a mesh allow me to manipulate that mesh the more, right? So if I select this cube and go to vertex mode and select the vertices, I mean, it's cool, I can tweak it and all, but there is really not much I can do aside just moving these vertices, right? But having this, if I select this and go to vertex mode, find out that there is so much I can do with this. There is so much more, manipulation I can create on this cube, right? I'm moving this around, right? I'm moving, can bring this out here. So this, I can basically disfigure the cube with more components than the cube with less components, or generally speaking, I can the object with more components than the ones with less, right? So this is also very important. You need to be able to add subdivisions or find ways to create subdivisions in your mesh when you're modeling, for you to be able to manipulate it to a much more finer detail. So that's something that's important to note. So before we start modeling, I want to just run us through some modeling tools. Some tools we'll be using a lot in modeling. You might have a need where you have two objects on your scene. Let's say you have a sphere and you have a cube, right? So what I'll be doing now is to go through some of the tools. I won't go through all of them. Some of the important tools you might need when you're modeling in Maya. If you look at the top menu, you can see after Windows, you have your mesh, you have your edit mesh menu, and you have your mesh tools. These three, you are going to be playing with them a lot. So let's look at some things in mesh. It's Booleans, we can skip that for now. Let's look at combine and separate. So let's say you've created a model. Excuse this, my funny looking model. What are we going to call this? Let's say this is the Golden Globes Award or something, right? You just created an award, some bar or something. Use the combination of a sphere and a cube to do that. Let me just tweak it up a bit, and then but obviously you want this to be one item, right? You want this to be one item. What you can do is to select both of them, click, say mesh, and combine. So what that does, that it combines the cube and the sphere to become one object, so that once I click on it, it selects just that one item. So of course, with that item selected, I go back to mesh and I separate, and it separates those two items. So this is a very important tool as well. I want to show us the mirror as well. So mirror is used for when you're modeling, when you're modeling something that is symmetrical, you don't need to bother modeling everything. I'm going to give us a very simple example here. Let me add this cone, right? I'm going to delete the first half of the face. Now let's say you're modeling this cone. Of course, it's going to be something more complex, right? You can model half of it, right? Because you want to spend time modeling everything and it's symmetrical. So modeling one half is just basically going to be the same thing that is duplicated on the other side. So once you are done modeling one half, you can select mesh, go to mirror. You can select the square right next to the menus to see your options. So when your options come out, most times the default options are good enough, but if you know what you're doing, or if you know the specific thing you want, you can edit the menus to give you exactly what you want. So if I click on mirror, see that it basically mirrors half of my cube. Didn't really do a good job of that, so I need to come in and now add some more settings. So I can reduce the merge threshold and play with it a bit. So I reduce that to 0. So you see that it's a perfect duplicate. So that's what the mirror is for. Most times you'll be using this when you're maybe doing your character modeling and you're modeling a face, right? So you can just model one half of the face with the eyes, with one of the nostrils and all. Once you've gotten to that level, you don't need to bother going to model that whole part again on the left side. You just need to mirror that. That's what the mirror tool is for. A very important tool when you're modeling. We can now go to the edit mesh. You can see you have your bevel, you have your detach, you have your extrude. We're going to be looking at some of this. I will start with the bevel. So what the bevel does is that it smoothens, the edges of your mesh. Let me give you an example. Let me create a cube, right? I can select this cube. So I've scaled it a bit. What are we building? You can say, okay, maybe I want to build the iPhone, right? This looks, in terms of size and shape, looks like a phone, but definitely doesn't look like the iPhone. Maybe like the the Google Pixel, maybe, but the way is blocky like this. But we know that the iPhone, it has some curves at the edges, right? So how do we achieve this curve? I mean, there are different ways we can go about it, but the simplest way, what the bevel tool allows us to do, is to select that edge. So if I go to edit mesh and click, remember what I told you about shortcuts? The shortcut for the bevel is Control B, so you can do that as well. I'm just going to click on this bevel. See what happens. Not exactly what you are looking for, but of course we still have other options to play with. So if I come to this menu that comes out when I bevel, I can reduce the fraction, for instance, let's say 0.2, and I can add some segments as well. So I've added a bit more curvature to that, right? Segments 0.2 fraction and 3 segments. So this is looking more like an iPhone edge. So we can select this and do it for the 3 other edges, and I can hit G if I want to perform the last operation. I can hit G and it bevels, gives me that bevel again. So I can go and can reduce the fraction again, 0.3, and can add more segments, right? So now this is looking more like an iPhone would, right? So that is what the bevel is for. All right, another tool we'll look at is extrude. Extrude is an extremely important tool. You're going to be using extrude a lot. What is extrude? You're basically pulling out a new face out of an existing face in order to create a new shape. So let me show you an example, how it works, and then I can show you an example of how you can apply it. So let's say that this is a cube, right? And this cube has a face. So I can select this face and I can click on extrude. If I go to edit mesh and click on extrude, as you can see, the shortcut for extrude is Control E. But you can do that, but I'll just click on the menu now. It extrudes. See, I've basically brought out another face. Like I'm pulling out another face out of the existing face. Now there are different things you can do with extrude. I can come and select this and I hit G again to perform the previous operation. It extrudes. You can see what happens to the gimbal. You can select to scale and you can extrude in, right? And I can hit G again and I can extrude, sort of scaling in, I can move out, right? So I can do that again. I mean, at this point, I'm just playing around, but you can begin to see how you can create different kinds of things just by using the extrude. I mean, this is looking like a pipe or something, but yeah, different shapes just by extruding, right? I hit G again, right? So I can scale it out, right? So when you have your reference or what you're working with, right, this becomes very handy. So let's go back to our iPhone example. Let me show you more applicable way of using it. So like I said, this looks like the iPhone, right? Or what we have as the working example of the iPhone currently. You know what, I'll actually, let me see if I can get back to, I'm just undoing now. I want to get back to before I bevel the iPhone so I can just, all right. So I want to apply a uniform bevel across. So if I select this and I bevel the iPhone, our iPhone model, I can play with the fraction a bit, add some segments. So now this is looking more like an iPhone. Now, yeah, this is looking like the shape is looking like that of an iPhone, but I mean, this is not how a phone looks. You know, a phone has a screen. So this is just like a slab of block. So how do we create our screen? So I can select this face and go to our menu and select extrude. My gimbal comes out. I can decide to scale it in slightly, right? If I scale it in slightly, now we have the division for our screen. Now most phones are almost full screen, but we normally still have like a bit of space for the border of the phone. So with that, I can hit extrude again. I'm hitting G to perform my last operation. I can now move inside, right? So now this looks more like a phone. Obviously, probably needed to add something for the speaker and all, but now this looks more believable when you say that this is a phone. So with the extrude, we're able to push the face inside, right, to create that look of a screen. Another quick example of the extrude. Let's say I want to create like a picture frame. These are just very quick examples just to give you ideas of what you can do with the extrude tools. So I want to create a picture frame, for instance. This is a sphere, right? Just a simple looking cube now, right? What I could do is I could select the face and hit extrude. If I extrude this, I can pull it in to create the frame of my picture. I can hit extrude again, push it inward. Now this looks more like a picture. Various things you can do with the extrude tool. Once you learn the tools, what you can do with it is actually only limited by your creativity, right? So that's that for the extrude tool. We can look at bridge, for instance. Let's say you want to join two edges. So I'm going to use a cube for this example. Let's say you have a cube and you're working on the cube, or deleted a face, right? Yeah, you can also delete components as well. So I deleted the face of this cube. And now, what are we building here? Let me add some divisions here. If I wanted to add a division to this, I could just use this. Okay, let me use the insert edge tool. I'm going to look at this shortly. So I added some divisions, right? Now, what if I wanted to, I wanted to add a face between this edge here, right? Between this edge here and this edge here. That is basically what you use the bridge for. So I go to edit mesh and I click on bridge. So it creates that. It creates that bridge. Basically, that's what it's called, bridge. Right. So what if I wanted to do the same thing across here? Right? Or what if I wanted to add a subdivision here? There's another important tool called the insert edge loop tool that you'll be using as much as you'll be using the extrude as well. So if you go to the mesh tools, right, under mesh tools, you will see the insert edge loop tool. So what this does, it allows you to add divisions to your meshes, right? So let's say I wanted to create this same bridge effect on this side of the cube. See that I don't, because of the way I created the cube, right? Maybe I created it, in its default way, or I created it before, and now I find out that I actually need more subdivisions. I can come in here and use the insert edge loop tool. It basically adds an edge loop all around your mesh. So this gives you something to work with basically when you are, modeling. So now I've created this edge loop. What you've noticed now is that I now have an edge here and I now have an edge here. Now I can do what I want, to do with this edge. Let's say that I want to bridge that edge. See, I couldn't bridge this edge before because I didn't have divisions to do that. But the insert edge loop tool allows me to add subdivisions. It allows me to add as much as. Now look, another example of this would be, let's say I wanted to extrude the center portion of this. This is our box. It's basically a box, right? I can't do that, right? Currently, the subdivisions I have allows me only to extrude all the whole edge, basically. So let me try to extrude. You see that I can't do that. It's extruding the whole edge. So what I could do, I could extrude. Now this is a hack I could use. I could extrude and scale first. Now this allows me to do what I intended to do, and then I can extrude again to bring it out. Remember what I said? Different ways of doing the same thing in Maya. So this is another way to achieve what I want to achieve. But let's say I don't have that, right? What I can do, I can use my mesh tools and insert my edge loops, right? So I create, using my insert edge loop tool, I create that center that I'm looking for, and then I can extrude. If I select the face, I can now go to mesh tools and extrude. If I can find it, that would be edit mesh, extrude, right? So same thing in a different way. So that's what the insert edge loop tool is for. You're basically adding subdivisions to your model. When you're modeling characters, for instance, you can find out that you need to add a certain curvature to your character, right? Let me come back to our sphere and the cylinder model. Let's say you want the base of this to be a little more, not a little less blocky, for instance, and my pivot is not where I need to be, so I can go to modify and select center pivot. Now center that. So let's say I wanted to make this to just have a little bit of curve, right? I can't do that now because I don't have enough subdivisions to do that. So what I need to do is I need to select my tools, insert edge loop tool, and I can add a couple of edge loops, right? I can add a couple of edge loops here. You can add as much as you want, but you want to, add as you need so that, you don't get overwhelmed by the number of edge loops in your scene. So now that I have edge loops here, when I go to my component mode, you see that I can now select, select the vertices here. I can go to my wireframe to view what I want to do. I can come here and select, I can scale it a bit. Now see what it's doing for me. I'm adding some curvature, Now this wasn't possible before because I didn't have enough subdivisions, but with the create edge loops, I'm able to have, some curvature around it. Now it's looking more interesting. I can also, because this side needs a bit more, I can create an edge loop around this place and also play with it a bit. So obviously we're just doing abstract shape now, but you are getting the points, right? So I've taken this from just a simple, linear shaped cube to something that has a bit more curves. Now, if I hit the smooth, if I do that, I probably need to add some more edge loops around it. If I add some edge loops here to tighten it up, and I hit the smooth button, you can see that it's much more softer, right? So we've gone from something that was just linear and blocky to something that is very smooth. So what I did there was I hit the 3 button. The 3 button will give you your subdivision mode. So it basically makes everything much smoother. I have to be careful when you're using it though, because it doesn't necessarily work for all items. You need to make sure that you're ready to smooth what you're working on. So that's that for the edge loops. We have a couple of more tools to look at, and that will be it for the most important tools. Now, sometimes you might want an edge loop and you don't want it to run around your mesh, or because you've messed with your topology, it's not going around anymore. So if I select insert edge loop, for instance, here, let's say I want to insert an edge loop. Let's go back to my iPhone mesh. Find out that, let's say for whatever reason, I want an edge loop that will run across this phone. See that it's not doing that because I've kind of broken the topology because of some of the operations I did on this particular mesh. And what I can do is I can use my multi-core tool. Multi-core tool allows me to manually insert points, around an object, thereby creating, some sort of edge loop as well. So I select on the multi-core tool, and then I start clicking, on the edges, and it starts creating that point for me. So I'm clicking on the multi-core tool. So I just click. So it's showing me where that would be already. So I can also click. You get the idea. I'm going around the whole. Click, and I believe you can also delete if you make a mistake. You can delete, right? And I can actually connect this here. Why is it not? So you have to make sure that everything is selecting, the edges are selectable. So if I click on this exactly, and I click on enter, find out that I've kind of, through a longer process, inserted an edge loop. Now this might, of course, this is more tedious, but sometimes this is what you have to do, because you're able to create that subdivision using that edge loop. So now I have an edge loop here that I can also play with, manipulate, create my shape, turn my iPhone into a tent or something. But we don't want this, right? Let's leave it the way it's looking. So that's that for the multi-core tool. We also have create polygon tool. Create polygon tool is for creating a shape. Now if we come back to this our shape here, let's say you want to fill this hole, right? You want to cover this hole. You don't need it anymore. You can even delete this. Let's delete the one at the center. Let's say you mistakenly delete. Okay, these are different edge loops, right? Let's delete this. Right. Let's say you want to fill up this hole, right? I can come here, use my append to polygon tool, and click on this, click on the edges, and that covers up that open space, right? Now, again, like I said, there are different ways to do the same thing in Maya. I could also select the edges here, and I go to my mesh, and I click on fill hole, and it fills it up. So the same thing, just different ways of doing that, right? So that's how I've closed up edges. So yeah, so let's try and use what we've learned so far to create an example. Let me create a plane here. Can use as our base. So this works as our floor. So let's create something. Let's use this as a reference. So this is like a stool. You can see that the base looks like, you can see a bit of, I mean, you can call that, you can come up with that with a cube. You can come up with that with a cylinder, right? These are more cylinders. These are more cylindrical shapes. So let's try that out. So let's start with the base. I'm going to try this using a cylinder, right? I might be wrong, but let's just try that out. So if I zoom into what I'm doing here, I can scale this out to give me the base of what I'm working on. So trying to create the base. So obviously this, as far as the base shape goes, this is what it looks like. What we, I mean, when we look at the model, we can see that there are some, there are some details that come to our mind. First of all, it's not that blocky. There is a curve here. There's a curve here. So now it's now about paying attention to your reference and using the tools at your disposal to get your model to be as close as possible to the reference. So to achieve that curve, I'm going to use my insert edge loop tool. I clicked on the box to the right of it to bring out the menu. I want to do a trick. So if I click on that box and select multiple edge loops and reduce the number of edge loops to 1, usually what multiple edge loops does for you is that it creates multiple edge loops. So you can set it to 2, 3, 4 edge loops. But if I set it to 1 and I click, what it does for me is that it creates an edge loop at the center. So that's a trick I like to use, to have my edge loops at the center. So if I create that edge loop, I can scale it out a bit. Now it has that curve. Let's look at the picture again. That curve here. It's no longer just a cylinder. It's now having that, leathery, curve about it. So we also need to achieve something like that at the top. So we can see we have this kind of joints here. Yeah, this bit here, we need to also replicate something like that. I'm thinking about how to go about that currently. What I can do is what I'm thinking about doing anyways, we can try that out. Again, don't be afraid to try different things out. You could do something and it doesn't work out. You can, go back a few steps, try a different approach. It's all part of the process. So what if I select all these faces and go to my edit mesh and extrude? Now if I do that, I can scale this in. By doing this, I've given myself some subdivisions to work with, right? Now I can, if you want to select an edge loop, if you right click and go to your edge mode, right? That's how you access that component mode. Click on the edge, select an edge. If you want to select the whole edge loop, you can double click. Once you double click, you can move that around. So I'm trying to, again, like I said, you're just manipulating your components to create what you want. So I'm going to make it rounded a bit more, right? Just to make it a bit more rounded, basically is what we're trying to do. So this is, this is close enough. So like I said, we want to create this bit here. Thinking of adding an edge loop. As you can see, I've been using the edge loop tool, the extrude tool a lot, right? So instead of always going to the menu, I showed us this in the last class. I could go to my insert edge loop tool, can Control Shift, click on it. That icon is added here. So you have to just know that this icon is now insert edge loop tool. You can also come here and Control Shift, extrude. So I have this here. So whatever tools you use constantly, you can put in your custom shelf so you can just access it directly from there. So back to what we're trying to do. I can select an edge loop very close to this edge here. I'm trying to create that narrow bit. And I can then select that bit and I can hit on extrude. So once I hit on extrude, allows me to bring this out a bit. So doesn't
Hi guys, it's me again. If you're enjoying this and you love to learn more, make sure to visit our website to get more of this program tailored for you. And do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel.